Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Tosh Can Plant, and today we will be talking about how to water your succulents and your cacti. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more plant content. Now let's get on with the video. So there are many types of succulents and cacti, but for the most part, their care is generally the same. So I keep these plants outdoors and in full sun or in direct sunlight throughout the day. These types of plants are able to survive in very dry and arid climates because they're actually able to store a lot of their water in their leaves and in their root systems. These plants can actually go a longer period of time without having to be watered. Not like your regular plants that need to be watered maybe once a week or twice a week. These plants can actually go for extended periods of time without being watered, and it is actually preferred that you underwater them than you overwater them. So it is much easier to save a plant, or at least a succulent or cacti, that is underwatered than one that is overwatered. Because of this, my best advice to you if you want to get started on collecting succulents and cacti is to neglect them, basically. And I know that this advice sounds a little bit strange, but at least for succulents and cacti, minimal care is best. So from my experience, what I noticed is that when I tended to pay too much attention to my succulents and my cacti, I tended to overwater them. And I don't really know why that is. I think it's because when I check them all the time, I would always second guess, is the soil dry? Is it moist? Is it wet? Do I need to water it now? So instead of waiting, I would water it. And that led to a lot of my succulents actually dying because of overwatering. So overwatering is actually the #1 killer for succulents. And that's why a plant that is fairly easy to grow is actually quite difficult because a lot of people don't know how to properly take care of them. So what are some signs of overwatering and underwatering? So for underwatering, usually the signs that you would see on your plant is dried, shriveled up leaves throughout the plant. So sometimes when your plant is growing, you'll find that there are some dead leaves towards the bottom of the plant. Don't be alarmed if you see that. That just happens when a plant grows, and it's normal. It's a part of the process. But if you start to notice that a lot of the leaves are starting to dry and shrivel up, and there's no new growth coming out from the middle, then that probably means that your plant is underwatered and it does need to be watered again. So for overwatering, the opposite happens. So you'll notice that the leaves will become very soft and mushy and almost translucent looking. So those are usually signs of overwatering. And once a plant becomes overwatered, it is very hard to save that plant. So how do you water these types of plants? As I mentioned in my last video where I talked about 5 tips on how to not kill your plants, one of the ways that you can test to see if your plant needs to be watered is using the finger method. But for succulents and cacti, instead of sticking your finger through the top of the soil, you're going to actually stick it through the bottom, through the drainage hole. So I'm going to show you an example here with my crown of thorns succulent. So what I was talking about earlier is that for most plants, when using the finger method, you're going to want to stick your finger at the top of the soil of your plant about 2 inches deep to see if the soil is still moist or if it's dry and needs to be watered. But if I was to do that with a succulent or a cacti and I pulled my finger out and it was dry, I might be overwatering my plant. And the reason for that is because succulents and cacti need to dry out completely before watering again. So if I was to just stick my finger at the top of the soil, I would never know if the bottom half was still wet or if it was actually dry. So here for my terracotta pot, the drainage hole is right below. It's right over here. So all I'm going to do is just stick my finger, and yeah, so it's really dry because actually the soil is just falling out now. So this plant is ready to be watered. And as you can see, no soil really stuck to my finger. A bit of dried soil stuck to my finger, but not any moist or wet soil was stuck to it. So that means that this plant needs to be watered. Now if you look at this type of pot on my sand dollar cactus, the drainage holes are actually on the side, so over here. And it does have a drainage hole at the bottom, but it is pretty small and it's really hard for me to stick my finger in it. So what I would do for this type of plant is actually use my moisture meter. So in these type of situations is when it would be really beneficial to have this type of tool. So this is the moisture meter, and this is really helpful when I'm not able to stick my finger at the bottom of the drainage hole. So now let me show you how I would use this moisture meter to figure out if my plant needs to be watered or not. So I just take my moisture meter and I'll stick it in the soil as deep as possible. And then I'll read what it says on my meter. Yeah, so it's in the dry category. When it says that it's in dry, that means it does need to be watered. I did check this plant a couple days ago because I do like to give it maybe 2 days after I re-dry to water it, just to make sure that it is completely dry. So I did check it a couple days ago, so today it does need to be watered. But if you do not have a moisture meter, you can also use chopsticks. I used to use that a lot before I got this. So what you do is you just take a chopstick and you put it in the soil the same way you would with a moisture meter, and you stick it all the way through to the bottom of the soil. And if you pull it up and there is a lot of wet soil stuck to the chopstick, then do not water your succulent or your cacti because they do not need to be watered yet. But if you pull it out and it is completely dry, there's soil that's falling off of it, then it does need to be watered. So it is the same kind of idea as the finger method, except you're using a chopstick instead. So it allows you to reach deeper into your pot without having to disturb much of the soil or the plant. And for my final example here, I have a house leek, and this one is actually doing really well. It has a lot of babies that are growing from the side, so I'm probably going to propagate this once it gets a little bit bigger. But this is an example of a plant that is really hard for me to check the soil. As you can see, the plant takes up basically the entire pot. So there's no way for me to really stick my finger in through here. The drainage holes are also really small, so it'd be hard for me to do that as well. So for this, I am going to use my moisture meter again and just see if it needs to be watered or not. So that's where this meter comes in handy, because I can actually just stick it through the side here and I can angle it so it goes where I want it to go. And here it is reading that it is moist. So I'm not going to water this plant yet. So for watering, what you're going to want to do is just completely soak the entire plant. But make sure that you do not water the leaves or any other part of the plant. And you're going to water until you see water that is dripping out. Just like that. What I usually do is I wait for it to completely stop dripping, and then I will water it one more time. And I do this just to ensure that the entire plant is completely soaked. So make sure, if you are using a drainage bowl like I am, that you empty it out after you are done watering. And the reason for that is because you do not want to let any plant sit in a bowl of water. Because if your plant is sitting in just a pool of water, it will take up that water that is left in there, and your plant will stay moist and it will lead to root rot, especially for your succulents and your cacti that do not want to be wet. They want to completely dry, to be soaked, and completely dry again. So this method is actually called the soak and dry method. So that's basically it for how to water your succulent or your cacti. It's pretty easy as long as you know when to water them. So as long as you follow these tips, then your succulents shouldn't be dying on you anymore, and you will have some really pretty and really healthy plants. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you all learned something new about your succulents and your cacti. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more plant content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!